Hey y'all, my name is Ann Wyatt. I started my career in workforce development with the state of Kentucky in 2010. That experience ignited a deep passion for manufacturing within me. I started this show hoping to raise more awareness around the bright outlook manufacturing careers have. Join me as I sit down with some of the manufacturing industry's most successful changemakers and learn how they're partnering people with technology. It's time to give people more meaningful work. This is Workforce 4.0. All right. Hey, y'all. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Workforce 4.0. I'm Ann Wyatt, your host, and we are joined with Florian Pestoni today of InOrbit AI. Florian, hi, how are you?
Hi, Ann. So glad to be here.
Excellent. And you are the founder, you are a three-time founder of companies, but your newest venture, InOrbit AI. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, of course. So at InOrbit, you can think of us as a data platform for robot operations. If you're familiar with a concept in cloud computing called DevOps, which is really taking the developer side and the operations side and putting them together, we do that, but for robots. So we call that RobOps. And essentially what we're trying to do is help people get more value out of the robot.
Excellent. With more robotics being introduced into the manufacturing workspace, you really want to combine those two, and you're seeing all these cloud-based platforms come out. So very cool. Interested to learn more about that. We are also joined with Ryan Treece today as our guest co-host. Ryan, how are you?
I'm doing well, and thank you. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's Friday, so
Yay.
doing really good here. Ryan, you are known as the nerdy IoT guy.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about what that means.
Ooh, good question. It means I try to IoT everything in my life. So my background, all factory automation, sensors, machine vision, wireless sensor networks. So I've always tried to automate my life at home to learn more about what I'm doing in the factory. Nowadays, I'm at Telit as a business development manager, their IoT platforms team for software. Also co-founder Industry 4.0 Club with yourself and some other great people. So that's about me.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, let's get into the conversation for the day, if that's okay for you. And I know you're super busy and we want to respect your time for sure. But I got to start out every show with the same question. And I'm not sure if you've seen Workforce 4.0 on LinkedIn or if you've listened on as a podcast, but
As long
I
as
got
you
to.
don't make me karaoke live.
Yeah, don't cue it up as soon as he says it. All right.
I promise I will not actually make you sing the karaoke. But you got to tell me, I love music. What's your favorite karaoke song or your favorite song?
All right, so I'm going to go pre-classic here, okay? Classic rock.
Yes.
And there's a song that The Clash used to sing called I Fought the Law. And for some reason, that's always kind of like, it's the theme music in the back of my mind, kind of, because one of the things that I'm not very good is at following the rules. And I like to kind of make up my own rules. So I don't know, it's been kind of like theme music for me.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. One of these days, I'm going to get Ryan to bring up the songs in the background. We should do that.
Yep. I'm working on my co-hosting skills. We're working on it someday.
But I would love to. I don't remember that song right offhand, so I'm going to have to go back later and listen to it because that sounds like Ann Wyatt theme music. I'm not going to lie. Awesome. So, we kind of talked a little bit in the intro about how you have founded 3 companies thus far, and you're currently working on InOrbit AI. I thought it would be really cool to kind of frame this conversation around your role as a founder and being successful, because I know a lot of listeners out there, they're interested in that perspective and also aspiring to be founders themselves one day. So kind of jumping into the meat of the conversation, Would you consider yourself a serial co-founder or founder? Is that a thing? Is that like a title?
Let me take half a step back before I answer that question. I think the role of founder has been glamorized, and
Mm.
it's really not as glamorous as it sounds, to be honest, right? If we're being real here, it just means you do a little bit of everything. That's really what it means. Because when you start a company, there's like a billion things to do, and
Yeah.
there's only a very small number of people to do them. So you do a little bit of everything. And I think that to me is the fun part of it, right?
Yes, it
I
is.
actually enjoy that. I think it's probably for other people, it's their definition of hell, because it's probably just like really hard to think about how to do a billion things, when you can really only do 20, right? And you can probably are qualified to do 5 of those 20.
Yep.
So I think I don't get into the whole founderism that I think, and I'm here in Silicon Valley. You walk down the street and there's founders everywhere. Everyone is probably a founder of something sometime. So I think it's much more kind of like, what kind of work do you do than anything else?
Yes, I know. So from my perspective, having my own company, I mean, I do get that a lot. People are like, "Oh, you have your own company, like you're kind of living the dream." I do everything. I work a lot. I work. That's everybody's like, "What do you do?" Work.
You can't not respond to your own email to do something,
No. No, I mean, today I was thinking about who I was going to complain to about, booking like back-to-back meetings for a solid day on a Friday. And I was like, me. It's me. It's my fault. Yeah, so that's an interesting perspective around the term founder that, I definitely resonate with as well. But when you're building companies up, my big thing is I want to see how you're incorporating your people, how you're building your companies around your workforce. And, how do you maintain that? How do you build up a company around the notion of keeping people first?
Absolutely. I think, to me, it starts with, again, another word that's hyped up, but the word vision, right? I think it's really kind of like, hey, it's more of a what if, right? What if this were a thing? What if we could make this happen? I think that's how I think about starting it. And really, when you bring people together, if you don't share that vision, that what if, then it's going to be really hard to work together in the early days. I think much later, when companies have a lot of structure, there are many what ifs within the company and many roles, and people join, maybe it's less of a will it work, which is kind of at the core of every startup, and it's more of a how does it work, or how can we make it work better. So I think that's fine. That's a stage that hopefully one day we'll achieve ourselves. But I think in the early days, it's really about having that kind of shared idea of where you want to go, where you want to end up.
I love that. Yeah, everybody's got to kind of know where they're starting from and where, like, it's like getting from A to B and then onward, right?
100%.
Do you have any best practices or tips for listeners that are maybe starting their own companies and how they evaluate that same mission in potential candidates?
Yeah, I think it's really maybe understanding what motivates people, right? And digging into that and understanding that not everyone is the same, and not everyone is going to be successful in a role, for example, that has a lot of uncertainty, for example, right? Some people deal with uncertainty better than others, and that's okay. You should find something that fits, what you're comfortable with. So I tend to probe a lot in terms of like, what's kind of your ideal job? So one of my favorite questions is I'll ask people, hey, if you could fully design sorry, I have a loud robot here that's going to be a little annoying. Let me know.
I love that robot.
I love it. Makes me feel like I'm on a manufacturing floor. So I can
Perfect.
appreciate it.
So if it gets too annoying, let me know, and I'll use InOrbit, of course, to make it stop.
Nice.
But so going back, I think one of my favorite questions is, so think about two dimensions, right? Mm-hmm. This is something I ask candidates. One axis is, what things you're really good at and what things you're maybe not so good at. And then the others is what things do you enjoy doing and not so much. Mm. So that kind of defines this kind of 2x2 matrix, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's like, okay, so what's in that upper corner, right? Where it's something you both enjoy doing and you're really good at. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, because one of the benefits of being a startup is we'll try to adjust the role to the person, not just the person to the role. And obviously, there's a little bit of back and forth. There's a little bit of matching. For example, I'll share something about myself. Mm-hmm. I love pizza. Mm-hmm. I enjoy pizza, and I'm actually not too shabby making pizza. InOrbit is not a pizza company, so maybe I find a way to work pizza into every one of my conversations, to be honest. But it's not my day-to-day job. So it has to some extent, align with what the company needs. But then there's a lot of flexibility. And I think that's one of the things that I strongly recommend for people who are maybe considering whether to join a startup, especially a technology startup, is you're going to do so many different things. You'll be challenged every single day. There's a lot of things we don't know, but one of the things I tell candidates when I talk to them is, look, I can't really promise much, right? I can't promise that it's going to be a unicorn or a zebra or whatever the animal of the day is these days that's fashionable. We're probably not going to be the next Google, but maybe, who knows? Mm-hmm. But feel comfortable promising one thing, which is it's not going to be boring. I think so far we have delivered on the not boring promise.
Yeah. So I've recruited for around 10 startup companies, and that's a very similar strategy when I'm screening candidates for those companies. I use that similar strategy of making sure that they're okay with startup environment, right? Which, I mean, is exactly what you're saying. I mean, it may not be stable. Mm-hmm. It's going to be, and I'll actually use the verbiage, it's going to be a lot of blood, sweat, tears for the first 5 years or so. That's interesting. That's some good confirmation and validation for me. I appreciate that. Ryan, have you ever worked at a startup?
I have not worked at a startup. No. It sounds fun, right? I do like the idea of having, multiple roles. I tend to, when I get in a company, kind of, pick up additional responsibilities. So it's fun. But yeah, I love the idea of a startup, right? And something that stuck with me, Florian, was when you said, what if? I love asking what if, right? You're in front of a customer, you see this problem, and your brain can't stop thinking like, hold on, what if we did this, right? Yeah. And now that's a product, that's a solution. And you can take that and and you can't not see that problem once it surfaces, right? So I think that what if question and just being able to be part of building something is always exciting.
And that's the trade-off, though, to a startup. And I love startups. Startups are exciting. I mean, that is the most fun in recruiting that I've ever had, is recruiting for startups, because it is just that adrenaline high that you get, the what if, the possibility, the flexibility, you have a part in actually being a creator, more or less, of what your job definition and scope is. And it's just a lot of fun. Ryan, we got to get you to a startup.
I love telling, but I am happy to work with startups all the time. That's the fun part.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You really think about kind of the future of the manufacturing workforce. It's ever evolving and ever changing anyway. And that's another exciting aspect of the industry, I think, is that it's a very exciting time to be working in this realm, right? And your company InOrbit is actually using cloud-based technology. And I just kind of want to take a minute and expand on that, because for so long it's been inherent inside the machine, right? The cloud technology, I really feel like is a key to unlocking more flexibility in the workforce, possibly for your frontline workers and other employees that maybe have not traditionally had as much access to technology and as much flexibility in their roles. But I'm kind of curious, Florian, how you see this type of technology influencing the long-term business landscape of manufacturing. And if you feel like the frontline workforce will benefit as well, kind of in that same way, or maybe different ways.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, specifically within Orbit, we are a cloud company working in robotics. So we're at that intersection of the two worlds, right? I think that's what makes it exciting. It also makes it a little bit harder to explain what we do, because you talk to somebody who's worked in the cloud world and you say robot, and they probably have crazy ideas about what a robot actually is.
Yeah.
But then when you talk to somebody who's only worked with industrial robots, they're like, we don't need the cloud. I can hardwire everything to a PLC. So they're very different perspectives. We're kind of in that middle where things are very fluid right now. But I think there's some massive value that comes from, this kind of like, you plug into a computing fabric, right? In the same way that you don't need to generate electricity for your house most days. You can plug into the grid. I think that's the value of the cloud. It's, I'll give you an example. So one of the things we do is we help companies basically monitor the health of their robot fleet, but also jump in and intervene, fix a problem when it occurs. And with robots, there's always going to be a problem of some sort, right? Especially if they're moving around, like you see behind me, they'll get stuck. They'll be waiting for something to happen, and it's not happening. So there's always some level of supervision that's required, right? So we were working with this company. They had hundreds of robots out in the field. They were using InOrbit and controlling this from their office. And then all of a sudden, this thing called COVID hit. And basically from one day to the next, everyone had to work from home. Well, guess what? They opened their computer at home and it just worked. And then they continue to grow, and they're like, wow, we can't really keep growing our team this way. And they decided to hire a team in Eastern Europe to control the robots that were around the US. And they were able to do that in a matter of weeks. And to hire people who were not, engineers necessarily. And again, I think it's not just the cloud itself, but it's like creating technology that's easy to use, that's accessible, that's, doesn't require a triple PhD in robotics to be able to work with robots. So there's a lot of elements that go into it. But if you had to, I don't know, ship computers in a box and plug them in somewhere across the world, you can imagine how long that would take. And, we actually turned on a new country in minutes.
Wow.
I think that's pretty
cool.
That is awesome.
That's really cool. So kind of thinking more about role as a business owner and everything, and hiring. I know we just briefly touched a little bit on that, but I'm sure you've hired people for sure. Had some experience with that. I'm kind of curious for listeners that are out there that are maybe exploring new career opportunities as a hiring manager. What does an ideal hire look like for you? I know you touched a little bit on this earlier, but is there anything in addition to kind of having that same mission and vision alignment?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, I would say, it's a combination of attitude and aptitude, right? And skills. But especially, if I stay focused on the startup world, I think attitude eats skills for lunch every day. Because you can learn, right? And the job of a startup as an organization, our job is to learn. And learn faster and learn more efficiently, learn before we run out of money. So I think that becomes like really critical. I think obviously if you're being hired as an engineer and you've never written code, then that's a painful thing to do, right?
Yeah.
But
that's me. I would suffer. I would not be. I'm just not. I can't.
No. Just chat GPT it. You're good. So attitude, aptitude.
Yeah. Then it becomes kind of a little bit more specialized. In some cases, it's that kind of like that hunger to learn. If you go a level deeper, I think there's this aspect of aligning with values, right? Every company has values, whether they put it on a poster on the wall or not. The values exist. And they're not the things that you say, but it's the things that you do every day. So one thing that we like to say is, one of our values is always be learning, ABL. And it's kind of like, I don't know if you remember that movie with Always Be Closing, and there's the
Glenn Ross, I think it was.
Ross, and
classic
there's this
sales
guy who's
movie.
a complete jerk, hardcore sales guy. And we're not that, right? But if you take that idea and you apply it to learning, that's actually pretty cool. If you are at a point where it's like, I'm done learning, I've learned, now I want to use my skills that I learned. It's like, maybe not such a great fit.
Especially in this industry that's constantly changing right now. It's really tough to just kind of say, I don't think it exists anymore. This is my job requirements, and this is all I'm going to do. Like, there's always a new system being implemented. There's always a new process, right? And there is this job scope creep, we can call it, right? But yeah, the way you view that is, oh, this is going to be fun. I haven't played with this kind of robot in this type of application before. And that problem solving like kind of mindset versus like, oh, this doesn't connect to that. Great, now I have to deal with that. I think those two completely different perspectives. And the customer feels that, your organization feels that, right? And yeah, that's a big difference there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm kind of thinking about this from a workforce development perspective, because we're always having these types of conversations, and we're so focused on the training and the reskilling and everything like that. And I mean, to our credit, I feel like that's something that we can actually physically do, right? We can, if we see that there's a need for upskilling and retraining, creating programs and offering those are an actionable item that, we can control as an industry. But aptitude and attitude kind of get into an individual's perspective, right? And there's a lot of unknown variables with that. I guess this kind of leads into, how do we address that as an industry, encourage that and grow that so that we can improve that aspect of career development for our future workforce?
Yeah, I'll speak about a particular angle here that works, which is from the robotics angle, right? I think robots are going through this super interesting transformation even as we speak. There's the old school robots that work in a manufacturing line. They do the same thing over and over. They do it very efficiently, but they don't know what they're doing to some extent. If they're in a cage, so nobody can walk in and get vaporized by a robot moving, 10 meters a second. So I think that's fine, and they have a role. What we're seeing is there's this new generation of robots that are using AI to understand the world around them and to navigate that world, whether it's a mobile robot, the ones that you saw around me, or a picking robot that's being controlled by a computer vision. There are all these sensors and cameras and mobile computing. All of this came together to make it possible for robots to have a level of autonomy. I think what that means is they're entering a lot of industries that previously would not have had a place for a robot, right? So it's no longer limited to manufacturing. And to give an example, we work with companies that use robots in hospitals, that use robots in hotels to deliver items to your room, that clean airport floors, airport terminals.
Oh, that's awesome. We have one of those here in Huntsville. We have
I've seen them in
robot that does
restaurants. I've seen them in restaurants delivering food. I thought it was so cool.
It is cool.
On the sidewalks, right? So here, when COVID hit, one of the local grocery stores, and we know the owners, and we were a little worried, how are they going to fare with all of this? Within 2 weeks, they were doing delivery with robots to the home.
Oh, wow.
And that was really cool. I mean, it is Silicon Valley, so things move maybe a little bit faster than other places, but it was totally, something accessible for a mom and pop shop to do. So I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, I agree. I'm seeing it in Austin as well. I think U of T Austin got some grants and things like that, and they're working on some automated robots, AMRs, I think the term is. Yep.
All right, so going back to your question. So to me, what's interesting is now no matter what industry you're in, you're probably going to have a robot coworker pretty soon. And that changes things, you're not going to talk about, hey, so what did you do this weekend? All they did was work. We're kind of boring that way. But what does it mean to work in an environment where there's robots? How do you interact with them? How do you become, and I, my favorite job of the future is to be a robot boss.
Yep.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I love that term, robot boss.
Yes. Can we make that a thing?
Yeah.
I've heard robot wrangler. I've heard robot coordinator. I've heard robot supervisor. What? We should just simplify and make it robot boss.
So I'll tell you one of the things that we do at InOrbit is we have a team in different parts of the world, follow the sun type of model where it's always daylight somewhere. And we call them roboteers. So a roboteer, kind of like a puppeteer, but for robots. They're controlling robots maybe in another continent. And they're basically helping the robot do its job. But you're not working with one robot. You're working with dozens of robots. So now, instead of, what can you do with your own hands, for example, is you can multiply yourself through all of these robots. And basically your job becomes, how do I help the robot do its job? How do I unblock the robot? Which is very much what a boss should do, right? How do I help you, achieve your goals? How do I unblock problems when they occur? So it's a very similar concept on the, robot boss idea. And we're doing it, right? And it's a great way to get started in robotics because you don't need to be, go to school for 6 years to do this. If you can play video games, you can probably do the job. So I think it's a really cool, if you will, job of the future.
I agree.
This is really cool.
I want to play video game robots at work. So any robot bosses out there, I have a lot of experience in gaming. It sounds fun though. I love, as soon as that industrial IoT, or you want to call IoT, that ecosystem with the ability to communicate with other systems and to tie that data in, right? Because I'm assuming if this is a robot in a manufacturing application, that's my background, you'll have that part data coming from the PLC. You'd have the robot, which like you said, is normally just pick this up, put it down, pick this up. Now the robot's saying, okay, how much raw material do I have? What's on the production schedule, right? Yes. Are we gonna have a line changeover? And to get that information from the robot or from the PLC, send it through the wireless network to the robot is always a challenge. Right. And so are you guys kind of seeing that in the factories as well? Because I see so many robots out there, and I'm sure they all communicate their own special protocol. And then how are you guys connecting to those other systems, right? The buildings, the opening the doors, things like that.
Yeah, so it's fair warning. It's about to get really nerdy. Okay, so
yes,
so stop me anytime.
Let's turn it up to 10 on nerdiness.
One of the things to think about is like a system that's not connected to the internet. Okay, there's probably not a lot we can do.
Mm-hmm.
But most modern robots have some form of connectivity. We can speak any language that the robot speaks naturally. So think of us as the Google Translate of robotics, right? So
I like that.
Sometimes we run software on the robot itself. A lot of modern robots use something called the Robot Operating System, or ROS. So we support that out of the box, but if you have your own proprietary mechanism, we can talk to that. So we'll take care of talking to that. And we've done this really with dozens of robots, dozens of types of robots, I should say, and then hundreds of units around the world. So we've cracked the code of talking to the robot and reporting on the robot and what it's doing. But I think if you stop there, then you're missing out on the complexity of where things are running. Mm-hmm. And as you were saying, in the Internet of Things world, in the IoT world, there are all these other things that know how to talk to the internet. Talk to another system. They may speak slightly different languages, but it turns out if you can talk to a robot, you can certainly talk to a camera, you can talk to a door, you can talk to a PLC. So you can talk to a lot of these components. And what becomes critical now is not so much can you exchange messages, which is, there's a term called interoperability, right?
Yeah.
But I think more interesting than that is, okay, great. So interoperability means, okay, you can sort of speak the same language, but what are you saying, right? What are the stories that you're writing? And then I think that's where orchestration comes in. So that's really where we come in, is we can orchestrate all of these different things, robots and cameras and systems, all of these different things, and make them all work in harmony together. So that's why the image that comes to mind when I say orchestration is the conductor.
Yeah.
I like that phrase.
Absolutely.
Lots of moving parts, right? And understanding.
Absolutely.
I think when you walk into a factory, it can almost be overwhelming sometimes with all the different assets. I get like the information overload sometimes. I'm like walking the floor and I was like, I have 45 questions already. What kind of data am I getting from that machine? What is the function? When does that break down? Okay, how does this tie into the overall process, right? So did you develop over time kind of these common applications that you're seeing with customers from different verticals? How does that conversation happen?
Yeah, so I mean, like every startup, we started small. We started with one very specific problem that we were trying to solve, which is, how do I know what my robot is up to? And then we started working up from there. For example, we just recently introduced the ability to integrate with what's called a warehouse management system, right? So this is a huge piece of software, sometimes from like decades ago, that knows where everything else in a warehouse, and an order comes in, and then you say, okay, you need to pick something in this corner, or this rack, this shelf, this slot over here, and then go to this one. So what we can do is we talk to that thing, and we translate that into missions for the robots. So the robots don't actually need to know the details of a warehouse management system. They just need to know where to go.
Right.
Yeah. And then we can, again, this is the other side of our Google Translate analogy, is we're translating from these kind of like business needs and business processes into, something that a robot can carry out and execute.
Yeah, and that's really been, on the rise. That kind of application is definitely on the rise, especially since COVID and, with the safety issues in a warehouse environment. I've spoken with a lot of people that, it was really unsafe for them to be in those tight quarters together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we've seen a huge influx in the adoption of robotics in the warehouse environment. It's just such cool technology.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool. It keeps getting so far advanced, and it's really exciting to watch. Outside of these types of applications, what are you the most excited about technology wise in the next 5 to 10 years? Because I'm kind of in a spot where I'm looking around and I'm like, where are we going? What's coming
Mm-hmm.
next and what can we expect?
Yeah, I'm actually, I know a lot of people have been freaked out by this whole AI craze that's been going on. I think I have maybe a longer term perspective on things, which is AI has been around for like 40 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's had its many cycles of hype, and maybe this one is different. I think the scale is different. But I think it's actually opening up a lot of great possibilities. So I think of that robot boss that we were talking about, and now you can very naturally, be the conductor without having to be great at music, right? It's kind of like you don't even need to be able to read the sheet music, and you
Mm-hmm.
can still conduct an orchestra. So I think that's making it more accessible for more people. And I tend to think that that's a positive thing. I think the way I look at it as well is I wrote a piece about this. If you think about the last few generations, Gen going backwards, right? Gen Alpha, which is the current one, Gen Z,
Yeah.
Gen X, and millennials,
Mm-hmm.
boomers, everyone. Each of them had some technology that kind of like represented that generation, right?
Yeah.
For boomers, maybe it was cars. X, maybe it was like video, the internet for millennials, the smartphone. So all
Yep.
these things. And there's this generation that basically grew up at the transition point, but the
Yep.
next one didn't know the world without that technology, right?
Yep.
And with every one of these new technologies, the previous generation said, oh, this is going to be bad for humanity. People are not going to know how to write letters anymore. I think Gen Alpha, which, if you don't know, they're still being born. It's the current generation. I think their eldest are turning maybe 12, 13, right? They're growing up with this stuff, right? They're not going to know how things were before robots. So I think I'm very optimistic that they're going to bring this new perspective. There's a lot of challenges in the world, right, with climate change and so on. I think it's the next generation that will make all of that better. I'm optimistic about that. I think AI makes it easier to use. I think there's a lot of opportunities with different ways to interact with robots. So
Mm-hmm.
the whole augmented reality plus robots, I think, is a super
Mm.
exciting combination.
Yep.
So I don't know. Generally, I think it's going to be some exciting times ahead.
Awesome. I love that. And, I love the idea of a robot boss. And,
Yeah.
I'm anxious and very curious to see what other new and cool career paths are developed from the technology advancement coming our way.
I agree. More tech, more AI. I like it. It's making our lives a lot easier.
Absolutely. Well, Florian, we're kind of coming to the end of the show today. I know that you've been very patient with us and we really appreciate you. For anyone out there listening to the show today, what is a good way to learn more about InOrbit or to reach out to you and to learn more about you?
Yeah, of course. So InOrbit.ai, lots of information. We have a YouTube channel so you can see what we do.
Oh, cool.
Um, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can contact me there. I have a newsletter that I publish on LinkedIn called Welcome to the Roboverse.
Oh, nice.
Cool.
So I talk about some of these more like societal and trends that I'm seeing out there. I'm here at what we call the robot space in Silicon Valley in Mountain View, California. We actually have a lot of community events that we host here. We've hosted Women in Robotics, Silicon Valley Robotics, universities. So we really welcome people. And we actually, something that's very unique is we actually open to the public for a few hours each day, just to give people an opportunity to interact with real world robots.
Oh, that's cool.
I want to go.
What they do. So if you're out here in California, definitely come and see us.
That's very cool. We are going to have to take you up on that offer.
Road trip, Ann. We're going.
We're going.
Awesome.
We're going. Well, Ryan, Florian, thank you guys so much today for your time and being on the show. This has been an absolute joy to have you guys. Closing thoughts, Ryan?
No, same. Thank you, Florian. It was a lot of fun. Appreciate you nerding out with us. And yeah, as always, a great time, man. Thank you for hosting.
Yeah, thanks you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. And we'll see you next time.